From metal maniacs, thrashers, punks, death metal delinquents, grindcore freaks, old school rockers, new school hardcore kids, and everyone else in between, this is the Solid Steel Syndicate podcast, baby.
Top of the morning to you, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Solid Steel Syndicate podcast. I'm your host, as always, Irish J Irons. You can find me on Instagram at Irish J Irons on Instagram. So today we're going to talk about the year's 1989, and that was an amazing year for thrash. There have been a couple of the best, in my mind, the best albums by a couple of the best thrash bands already put out. So thrash really had a pretty good stronghold at this point. It was really taking off. A lot of people were interested in what was going on in the scene, and there was old albums to listen to now by this point, and there was newer stuff coming out. So today I want to talk about Exodus, their album Fabulous Disaster, which came out in 1989. An amazing album, and just the time period, it fits perfectly when I think back to that time period. When I opened, a lot of times when you look at the inlays, the album covers on the record or on the tape back then, you took a look at the dudes and you always like kind of wanted to see like, all right, what do these dudes look like? Do they look like real metal? Do they look like, are they posers? Do they look like badasses? Do they look like bullies? Do they look like dicks? Like what kind of guys are they? So when I first opened up the Exodus inlay and took a look at those guys, and I just was like, man, these guys look like partiers, but like kind of like scary, kind of like fun, but they like to have a good time, but at the same time, like they probably are pulling pranks on you and stuff like that, which I enjoy. So in other words, they look like the kind of people that I would probably want to hang out with. On top of the fact that they're amazing musicians and have wrote some of my favorite songs of all time and some of the most iconic and iconic riffs, iconic songs. And I would classify Exodus as one of those bands that's always been around, that a lot of people would say if there was a big five, they should be in it. Or they would even say, all right, so we'll take the big four, but we need to bump one of these bands out and replace that band with Exodus. I've heard that argument, and I've heard it a couple different ways, a couple different scenarios. And Exodus was certainly, they were some of the pioneers, some of the forefathers. And of course, now you have Gary Holt, who is in Slayer. So that those dudes and that guy and that band is solidified as some of the godfathers of thrash. And I've read different stories where people change their guitar playing techniques. From what I've seen and read and heard, a lot of people credit Dave Mustaine with kind of putting some of the elements of thrash in there that weren't in music before, that kind of defined what thrash was. I've also heard that there's been times where certain bands would go and check out a band like Exodus, and then they change their style. I've actually heard that about a couple different bands, all bands that were around during that time period. And, I kind of think that that's part of what music is. You take from each other, you kind of see what works, what's cool. You always try and come up with your own stuff and be original. But if you see something else that's kind of cool, you want to put your own take on it, your own spin on it. And if you want to use it, then you use it. And, so I think that a lot of those guys that were around in the beginning, particularly the big four and the surrounding bands like Exodus, like Overkill, like Testament, I'm sure that there was a lot of things that they all picked up off of each other. Exodus is a band that I do feel they have more recently, but for a long time, they weren't getting the recognition that they deserved. I hear people say that they don't necessarily love the vocals. For me, that was one of the main things that attracted me to the band, was Zetro's vocals. And, talking about Fabulous Disaster, his vocals, he just sounds like one of those obnoxious kids like from the 80s that would wear the denim vest and with the patches all over it and be throwing spitballs at people and be smoking a cigarette, sitting on the back of his Camaro in the parking lot. Like he just, his voice just sounds obnoxious. And I mean that in a good way. His voice is his voice and Bobby Blitz from Overkill. Those guys have what I call the buzzsaw voices, that they just cut right through the distortion. They cut right through the amplification, cut right through everything. And when I got a little older and when I got in bands myself, I started discovering that, which I didn't know right away, but some bands is sometimes they'll tune their guitars or they'll get a certain guitar sound so that it matches the vocalist, so that it matches what the singer's doing, which I always thought it was the opposite. I always thought the singer tried to hit the notes that the guitar players were playing, which is true to a point, but there's kind of a common ground and you can do some things on guitar. And Exodus, I think, definitely did that. They have like a kind of a tinge, like a high-end tinge to their vocals. I'm sorry, to their guitars, which definitely go right along with Zetro's vocals. And it's a perfect fit. The sound is just, it's different from other bands that were coming out at the same time, probably because of that tinge. Also, the production is great, but there's something a little bit different about the sound. And I try and talk about albums that have differences in them rather than talking about the same thing. But aside from the sound, was the riffs, and a lot of people know that Kirk Hammett was in Exodus at one point. So and like I said, now you have Gary and Slayer. So that band has spawned some of the bigger bands in the world, as well as Exodus becoming one of the biggest bands in the world too. So the first track off of Fabulous Disaster is The Last Act of Defiance, and that's the beginning of that song. When I was listening to it, the prison system, it's just like, oh, like you're sucked in right away. You're like, okay, where are we going with this? And I do feel like a lot of these bands, even though they were thrashers and they were partiers and they were probably crazy and obnoxious and doing their own thing, and they also had like a socially conscious side to them, and they spoke about that and they talked about that a lot in their lyrics and their songs. So this first song, The Last Act of Defiance, is about a prison riot that took place and about prison conditions. And I've discussed Sepultura talking about that. So I know this was a big issue in the 80s, was like I said, people were starting to become more socially conscious and more conscious about the way that people treated each other, and particularly about the way people in prison were treated. Everyone's human beings. So this was just to kind of shine the light on that. And it's kind of scary if you think about some of the lyrics, which are amazing, and the way Zetro delivers them. They cut through the song, and just a sea of agony rolled in like the coming of the tide. The more fortunate escape the insanity through suicide. Those are amazing lyrics. Those are thrash metal lyrics right there. And while it is amazing, you do have to take into account what he's talking about. So at the same time, while you're interested in the lyrics, you also can feel for the people that were in that situation and how crazy that must have been. Just a killer song. And like I said, the subject matter is something. In the 80s, there was some things that were much bigger issues than others, but socially conscious issues and the way people treated each other was something that was important. And if you listen to any of the albums I've talked about already and anything that's surrounding those albums, you'll see that they are talking about the way people treat each other and how to make things better, and kind of shining a light on some things. So that's definitely something that was important to all these bands. And like I said, there's a lot of crazy, funny, scary vocals or lyrics, I should say, that don't have anything to do with anything necessarily. But there is a lot of stuff that is very poignant and very important, and things that needed to be said. So The Last Act of Defiance, like I said, the way Zetro delivers that, a sea of I can't do it. A sea of agony rolled in like the coming of just the way he says that, and the riff that's going on behind it, and the drum beat that's being played. It's just perfect, and in every way. The guitar tone, everything about it was awesome. The album cover, that lime green, which kind of matches the eyeballs of my mascot, like kind of that toxic green, just really stood out when you went into a record store to buy that tape or that record. It really stood out. So just really cool packaging, and they're all sitting there looking at the TV, and the TV was a very, very popular subject. Just how kids were being brainwashed by television and being sucked into it and not going out. That all started in the 80s. And it was a different time period. So The Last Act of Defiance, just one of the killer songs on this album, and a great way to start out the album. And actually, they revisit one of the end of that sample in the beginning. I'm not sure who that is that's saying that, but they actually revisit that in another song later on in this album, and they play it backwards, which is cool. So the next song after the last act of Defiance, the next song is Fabulous Disaster, which that was another huge topic for us in the 80s. I'll be honest, there was so much subject matter about it in movies and television and news and music, particularly the music that I listened to, that I really thought I was going to die in a nuclear war. I really thought, I mean, there was so many movies about it and songs, and I know a lot of people felt the same way, that it was inescapable. It just seemed like it was going to happen. It was a foregone conclusion that that's how the world was going to end, in a nuclear war in the 80s. I think most people, and particularly most people my age, probably felt the same way. And it was something that we thought about, and it was something we were scared of. But at the same time, with some of these songs, and that's another thing that this type of music can do for you, the things that you are afraid of, it can help you kind of own those things or capture those things and kind of be in control. And if you're thinking about it on your terms, then maybe it's not quite as scary. But yeah, so the Fabulous Disaster, it again was a big time nuclear war song, anti-nuclear war song. And again, Zetro's vocals and the way the chorus is delivered, and forever after you can hear the laughter, world is being plastered by an evil bastard. Just amazing. Just, and the way he cascades those lyrics and the way they flow one over the other, and it just keeps coming at you and coming at you. Just a perfect delivery on those. But if you look back at like a Megadeth particularly, you'll see like a nuclear, well, they have the nuclear symbol, and of course they have Vic Rattlehead. There's a lot of times in the older albums, you'll see a nuclear mushroom cloud in the back, and Metallica, Slayer, all those bands, Testament, they all talked about nuclear war. So it was definitely something that was fresh in our minds at all times. And Fabulous Disaster is just talking about that, talking about how it just takes one person, one madman to get in control, and it could literally end the whole world. And it's always a domino effect where one person does it, one country does this, another country does this, and then before you know it, the whole world is involved. And with nuclear weapons, it doesn't take much to literally destroy the entire world and everyone on it, and make it uninhabitable. So it's something that a lot of these bands were warning people about. And as time went by, I do think people, I'm not saying that world leaders were influenced by metal or thrash, maybe, but I think at some point, just talking about it instead of leaving it go and letting it fester and kind of trying to ignore it and not talking about it, I think talking about it made people more aware. And the awareness to this is probably the most important issue, because again, this could wipe out an entire planet. So it was critical that these bands and some of the news items and things like that, it was critical that those things were talked about and discussed, and to help try and keep that under control. So after Fabulous Disaster, we have, it's hard for me to say, because I have so many songs that I say that's my favorite song. Probably Holy Wars by Megadeth is my favorite song. And then I would Toxic Waltz, that main riff and that whole song, and just the way the drums are laid down in it, it's so danceable, and Tom does a great job with the drum beat and just keeping it at that mid pace where you just want to circle pit and you can dance and you can thrash and you can bang into each other. This is a perfect song. I used to do a radio show. It was called The Toxic Waltz with Irish J back in the day. And obviously I named it after that song. Again, it's one of my favorite songs of all time. It's just such a cool riff, and just such a fun song, even though, again, it's talking about, toxic. And that was another thing that was big, was toxic waste dumps and stuff like that. Another thing that, again, people my age were probably worried about and a little bit scared of. But again, if you're naming songs Toxic Waltz, you're kind of owning that fear, and you're owning that, something that you can't really control, but you're kind of owning it through the song. And this song obviously is about the dance floor and moshing. The video's killer. I learned some dance moves back in the day off of this video. And, he talks about some of the dance moves. You used to do the monkey, but now it's not cool. The twisted mashed potato, no exception to the rule. Just throw your elbows for a good, friendly, violent fun. Just talking about what goes on in the pit. and you know, I knew what was going on dance floors prior to that, but this was one of the first songs to actually discuss what was going on the dance floor from the singer's perspective, and seeing, you know, what was happening. I know DRI had Thrash Hard, but this song, I'm pretty sure this song came out before. I'm not sure what year Thrash Hard came out, but just from the singer's perspective and seeing the pit, and you can feel what's going on that dance floor, and you can you know, bounce back for some blows, and blood runs out your nose. And if you've been in a mosh pit, you've probably, like myself, you've probably had a black eye before. Don't start to cry if you get a black eye. Just dive back in and give it another try. But, you know, I've been poked in the eye, I've been punched in the face, kicked in the face, elbowed in the head, but it's all in the name of getting your aggressions out through that music. So this song just really captures that. And this song really captured my heart when I heard it, just because he was talking about what was going on. And it was real. It was, you know, sometimes the lyrics to some of these albums I discuss are fantasy, or they're talking about stuff that you don't know about. But when they're talking about what's actually going on the dance floor, and then you're seeing the videos, and you can put everything together, and seeing the shows, and being there, it is something that's really cool. And I love the fact that they did this song, and they just, you know, the Toxic Waltz, and it's loose, it's got some swing to it. But that main riff is just one of my favorite riffs of all time. It's definitely up there. So the next song after that is a cover. It's Lowrider, originally by the band War. I got to be honest, this is not one of my favorite covers. I don't really care for the original. It's okay, but it's not a song that I've ever would have thought, like, oh my God, I'd love to hear Exodus's take on this song. I'm not sure where this came from. I don't know if this was like something that the record company was like, hey guys, we need you to cover a song, and you know, this song made this amount of money and no one's doing it right now, so it's, you know, it's something, you know, that not everyone else has covered. And you know, I don't know, I'm not sure where this cover came from. I do like the cowbell in it, but I don't know why they chose to cover this song. I think it's a weird cover, and I really think it interrupts the flow of the album to that point, which is just, I mean, it is a big giant ship coming through, just crushing icebergs, just rolling, knocking stuff down, plowing stuff over, and then it gets to, then you hear that cowbell, and that cowbell is recognizable with that song. Like when you hear that cowbell in that rhythm, that Tom's playing, you hear that cowbell, you know that's Lowrider. So you know this song. But I get it, like it's Bay Area, so maybe that song was more popular on the West Coast at that point for them. But I don't know. I didn't really. I felt that cover, especially in that point of the album, interrupted the flow of the album. The next song, which does also, and maybe this is what they were doing, so maybe they were slowing the album down a little bit, because going into Cajun Hell is pretty slow in the beginning, and it's got that like that Cajun like bayou sound, and I think there's a harmonica in there, which, who uses harmonica in thrash? But it still sounds awesome, because this song is creating the beginning of this song is creating a picture in my head, with the it almost reminds you of a dude sitting on a front porch of the bayou with the river going by, and he's sitting in front of like an old shack playing a banjo, even though, you know, they're not playing a banjo, but just the harmonica there, you start to picture it. And then obviously when the riff comes in, and you know, Cajun Hell, it gets hard, it turns back into Exodus again. But the subject matter for this song, again, like I don't know where they were going with it. I like it because it's so different, but only because the song is so good that it works. But maybe the subject matter is kind of like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre kind of family. I think, like, you know, unkindly people to strangers, unkindly people to strangers they take. Like, so maybe it's just about like the Cajun people and how scary they are. But again, that's not subject matter that I've heard in any other song. I don't know any other song, any other thrash band, or even any other popular band, or 80s at the time. It was 80s, so 80s band that covered anything dealing with Cajun or Cajun Hell. So just them being original and being creative, and another really good song on the album, and I really like it. But again, that beginning, I always pictured a guy sitting by a river in one of those shacks, maybe a fishing rod thrown over the railing, and just plucking away on a banjo. So good job of creating a vision in people's heads, and something that was different. The next song, again, we talked about this, about them being socially conscious. The next song is called Like Father, Like Son, and it's about abuse, and it's about ending that cycle of abuse. And it's really, you can feel Zetro. He's approaching the vocals differently, even though that note that he hits, like, that's pretty much where he stays. But you can feel his approach to the vocals are a little different. They're more heartfelt. You can tell he's taking this subject seriously. And and then when he's screaming, "Please, Daddy, no more!" like, he's reenacting that. And if there is someone who was abusing their child, maybe they heard that, and maybe it did wake them up a little bit. Again, being socially conscious, maybe it did. You hear someone else screaming, "Please, Daddy, no more." Maybe that, as an abuser, maybe that made that person think about it from a different perspective, and maybe it caught them. I don't know. I'm just thinking about how it could help someone, and maybe from a person who was abused, maybe it helps them to get that out through the music. Again, the music is a great place to put emotion and feeling and sadness and happiness and sorrow and despair. So, this is another socially conscious song. It's a good song. It's not one of my top songs from this album, but it's a good song, and it deals with some really heavy subject matter. And that was a big thing back in the day. And at this point, it wasn't necessarily talked about as much as it should have been. And abuse in the household, whether it be for a child or whether it be for the wife or the female in the house, it's something that can't happen. It's something that should never happen. And again, if people aren't talking about things, then it exists in the darkness, and that's where it wants to stay. So shining a light on these things, and having people say, you know what, this is not acceptable, and we're not going to stand for it, is and that's where Zetro's coming from in this song, about ending that cycle of violence and about stopping it, and through that, maybe even stopping people going forward. Like I said, when I was listening to this album, I was probably, like, I'm going to guess, like between 14 to 16, somewhere in that area. And maybe other people my age listen to this and they're like, yeah, that's definitely not something I want to do, and something they think about as they get older. And so they don't go down that road because they've already thought about it as a younger person, as a younger a male, that, like, this is not something I'm going to want to do. And then you do start thinking about your future and how you do want to be. So again, socially conscious and very poignant and very, very important. And I thought it was excellent that they tackled this and that they explored it. And again, speaking of subject matter that was of a social nature, the next song is Corruption, and about fighting back. And look at how it's amazing for me to think that this was being discussed that long ago, 30 some years ago, being discussed, how the government was so corrupt. Can you imagine what things are like now? I don't know that things have gotten better, but again, shining a light on things like corrupt politicians and unfair taxes and things like that, and people skimming and people who aren't in politics for the right reasons. We need people in politics that are in politics for the people, not people that want to be in politics for the power, not people that want to be in politics for the money. People who want to help make people better and make society better, make our country better, and make our world better. That's what we need. And that's what, again, you see these long-haired, like, crazy dudes with ripped up jeans and high top sneakers and denim vests or leather jackets and spikes and spiked belts, and or the punk rockers with the mohawks. And if you think about what they're all talking about, subject matter, not every song, but if you think about what they're saying, if you can narrow it down, they're all saying the same thing. Like, they all want the same thing. And I think that's what we all want. I think that's why this music is so identifiable to people, because we're all coming from the same place. We all want a government that's there that's for the people, by the people, and we all want people to be fair, and we want people to be treated fairly, and that's what a lot of these. I don't know that it's discussed as much now in this type of music. I really don't. I feel like people kind of got away from it. Maybe they felt like, okay, that subject has been done to death, or we've talked about that enough. But some of this stuff, it has to be revisited, and we have to continue to talk about until we get to a point where we really want to be, and where things are really fair for everyone, and where we don't have corrupt politicians, and we don't have people being abused, and so that's something that's really important. And again, another great song though, and a great guitar. I think that Gary Holt writes some of the most catchy and hooky guitar riffs, and that's another thing that I've always loved about Exodus. Is the hooks. They have the hooks. They have the vocal hooks and the choruses, but some of those guitar riffs are just the riff alone gets stuck in your head. And just Gary Holt, you can't say enough. The entire band, they're all just musically incredible, and deserve all the accolades that they get, and definitely even more than they do get. But yeah, so Corruption, another good song on the album, tackling social issues. The next song is called Verbal Razors. Again, it has some of those vocals where Gary kind of, verbal razors cut you down the side. He's attacking you, like the vocals are attacking you, and you feel it. And verbal razors cut you down to size, just by the way he's delivering those lyrics. You feel it, and it's just his vocals stylistically carry the whole way through the album, and just some of the tricks that he does with some of the lyrics and the choruses, and the way he produces the song and sets the song up, and the way it goes with the guitar and the structure of the songs at that point are just, they're perfect. And again, this is such a great thrash album, and Exodus has a whole bunch of really great thrash albums. This one just happens to be my personal favorite. That's why I wanted to talk about it. I think this song is about people that talk shit and people lie. And this is about, verbally coming back at them. If you want to talk shit, well, I can talk shit too. And I can rip you apart, metaphorically speaking, verbally ripping someone apart. Verbal razors cut you down to size. And this is one of those things that maybe keeps people in check. Maybe before someone starts bullying someone or picking on someone or making fun of someone because they're different, maybe they'll think like verbal razors, like, if I say this, what's going to come back at me? And maybe it will help. Maybe the person will think like, okay, well, maybe I'm just going to be cool. Maybe I'm not going to talk shit. And that being said, talking shit with your friends and joking around with your friends and busting on your friends, that's different than what I'm talking about. It's fun, and everyone's different, and you got to get a feel for a person before you go there with them, or see how they are with their other friends. And once you become friends with people, you joke around, you bust on each other. My friends bust on me all the time. I actually love it. It makes me laugh. And I bust on them, and each other's hearts. So when I make fun of my friends, they know that I'm not making fun of them to make fun of them. I'm not making fun of them to make myself seem cooler or be some cool big dude. It's because it makes them laugh. And I know the same when they're making fun of me. If I do something stupid or say something stupid or mix up my words, which happens a lot, and they make fun of me, I know they're not, saying I'm stupid, or I know they're just making fun of me, and it's done out of love. So, but verbal razors, I don't feel like that's done out of love. I think that's done out of, okay, you talk shit, now I'm going to come back at you, and you need to consider that. So I think that's what Zetro is talking about right there. And then the next song is Open Season. Another sing-along chorus. Haven't you realized it's open season? Just something you can sing along to. I think that this song is about turning the tables on someone that is coming after you. And again, maybe it's about a bully that is constantly attacking this person, and then this person fighting back, and so that's kind of the way I take that song. Again, it's his vocals. I love his vocals, and again, it's that buzzsaw that just kind of cuts through everything, and you try and sing along with it, and you lose your voice right away, like me. It's just really cool. And Open Season is the last original track on this album, and And I think the tape that I had, I don't think the tape that I had the next song on it, which was Overdose, which is another cover from AC/DC. I think the tape I had did not have that cover on it, the AC/DC cover. But Overdose is a good song. I feel like they could have picked, I don't want to say better songs, but songs that are more appealing and songs that are more akin to like an Exodus song. I just feel like they went way out of bounds as far as the structure of the album and the way the album was flowing up until that point, up until the Lowrider cover, which really threw me off. And then to end it, I don't like ending a song with a cover at all. Any band, any cover, I don't like it. But to end it with that cover and slow it down and just, I don't know. I don't get that cover either. I like the song. It's a good cover. But it's just weird. I would have totally ended the song or ended the album with Open Season. And again, I don't know that Overdose is on. I'm sure there's a couple different versions of this album, and I don't remember Overdose being on the tape that I had. I'm pretty sure it was not. But so again, just going back, and the 80s was such a fun time. And when, especially this time, and Rust in Peace, I think still hadn't been out. I think they came out in 1990. So there was still more to come. But at this time, just looking back, it was so exciting because you had Metallica, you had Megadeth, you had Slayer, you had Anthrax, you had Testament, and they were all putting out stuff that was just one killer album after another. And then Exodus had a couple albums before this. The album right before this was Pleasures to the Flesh, which is a great album. My favorite song on that album was definitely the song Deranged. But when this, and I already loved Exodus, but when this album came out, I was like, oh wow, like Exodus, this album is particularly Toxic Waltz has my heart. Like this is just an amazing album, a killer album. I love the imagery, and again, just the picture of them sitting on the front, like mesmerized by the TV with the blue light, and then you have the green toxic color, and then the red, Exodus in red. It was just amazing, and this was a great time. Exodus is another one of those bands that kind of had like a party feel to them. I feel like a lot of parties that I went to, Exodus was being played, and probably because of Toxic Waltz and people just kind of getting into it and just kind of skanking and banging around a little bit, and so it definitely was a great album. And I know that everybody, I remember my friend got it before I had it, and we worked together, and he brought it into work, and he's like, dude, you got to hear this. And I think he got it the day it came out, and he knew I was an Exodus fan, and he's like, you got to hear this. And he gave it to me, and I took it home, and I just listened to it all night and sat there and played Sega and just listened to the tape. Tape was over, popped it open, turned it around, listened to the other side of the tape, popped it. I probably listened to that tape for about 4 hours. And then I gave it back to my friend, and I went out and got it. But Fabulous Disaster is just an amazing album, some amazing songs on there, and some songs that really solidified Exodus's place. Because even though there'd be bands that would put out a couple good albums and then they would disappear. And I'm not saying Exodus would have disappeared if they didn't put out Fabulous Disaster. But this album, I feel like, kind of took them to that next level. And I feel like a lot of people, if you talk to them about Exodus, this would probably be in the early days, because they put out a ton of albums since then that are all great. But if you talk about Exodus in the early days, this would probably be one of most people's favorite albums. A lot of people like Bonded by Blood too, which I think is a good album. But this one's my favorite. And most of the people that I know, Fabulous Disaster is their favorite album by Exodus as well. So again, it's been great talking to you. I love you guys. Thank you for watching. I'm Irish J. Irons with the Solid Steel Syndicate podcast. Again, thanks for watching. Have a good day. Thrash on, or no, thrash hard. I'm trying to think of a good exit thing to say, stay metal. I don't want to say stay metal. Everyone says stay metal, stay brutal, stay thrashy. No one says stay thrashy. But I'll probably just end it with thanks for watching.